Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another AgilQuest Agile Workplace Leaders Webinar Series. We've got a couple of great panelists today for a topic we're calling Creating a Workplace Your People Want to Work In. The challenge that we're discussing today is one we all are going to recognize within our workplace. We've got lots of staff who are working outside the office due to mobility. We've got fewer face-to-face interactions because of all the technology we're using, but we still have to maintain a high level of productivity, collaboration, and engagement. And this is all in the face of a brand new generation of people within the workplace. And we still need the office to be a place where they want to work, where they want to collaborate and communicate. So today's presentation, today's webinar is really on what can you do? What are some research, ideas, best practices, and experiences from the front lines on how to take this challenging situation and turn your workplace into the collaboration the new workforce needs. Our two panelists today are Janet Pogue-McLaurin from Gensler, who is focused on their workplace and headquarters projects. She was instrumental in Gensler's 2008 and 2013 workplace surveys in developing the Workplace Performance Index tool, which measures workplace effectiveness, and we're going to be hearing a lot about the data and research that comes out of that. She takes an active role in a lot of the key projects across the firm, and she's responsible for strategic planning, mobility studies, and the workplace environments that a variety of client types, including government and private sector, all enjoy and deploy within their best headquarters. Their clients include GSA, Capital One, CEB, Gallup, Symantec, 3M, and Amgen. We also have Cheryl Duval, the founder of Avance LLC, which is a firm that links workplace design with organizational development. As a workplace strategist, Cheryl is especially skilled in leading strategic planning efforts that explore the alternative approaches to the design of the office environment. She uses both creative and participative change management techniques to engage building occupants throughout the entire design process, and therefore increasing their acceptance of change within the workplace. She often develops and oversees multi-level communication strategies to support these efforts, which include branding, internal and external messaging, and customer focus groups. We also have a lot of data and a lot of examples from one of our customers, Noblis. Their Director of Operations and Security, Mark Smith, helped us create a really great set of examples about what they're doing inside their Innovation Center. Unfortunately, Mark couldn't join us at the last minute today, so we still got their slides. We have their case studies and some of their examples to show off exactly what's happening really on the front lines, and the environment's just like yours. So what we're going to be hearing today from the panelists and from these examples are some insight from the data and research that's going on with today's new workforce, some of the changes that are designed to meet those new needs, some very specific examples that you can take advantage of, take back to your own workplace, and hear some experiences that are happening within workplaces just like yours, and then what has to happen to make these changes, to make the impact and the benefit of these changes last. So without further ado, I want to turn the microphone over to Janet from Gensler. Janet?
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Let's start with who these people are that we're actually designing for. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a big shift in the workforce itself. That has actually changed. Millennials make up about 27% of the workforce. Technology and mobile devices have actually changed the way that we're working and the way that we get work done. In fact, this year was actually the tipping point. We now have more millennials in the workforce than baby boomers. And these millennials have some very different expectations. They choose first where they want to live and then look for a job, or at least 2/3 of them do. Almost 3/4 of them plan to live in urban cities, and 2/3 don't even have or want a car. And so they have high expectations of the workplaces that they want to work in. And so if we think about what millennials want, really what we all want. In fact, most of these are kind of people issues and not just generational issues. So all of us want the ability to think and concentrate. We want to be able to connect with others for group work. We want to have choice in where and how we work. The priority is around well-being on a personal level. We want purpose of how we, purpose in our work and supporting a cause larger than ourselves, and we want to be part of a community. We spend, and I'm going to unpack each one of these, we spend roughly half of our time doing focus work. The biggest culprits of focus are being able to focus effectively or distractions and interruptions. And those are probably the biggest complaints we hear in the office environment, as you've probably all seen and heard, and a lot of the mainstream media has been talking about, distractions, particularly in open plan. But we have been doing a lot of research on this, and what we have found is that even though the office is not ideal, 73% of the survey respondents still want to be able to prefer to be able to focus at the office. They would prefer to do it at the office than at home. Connect, on average, we spend about quarter of our time doing collaboration. This is both impromptu meetings, scheduled meetings, and we want those meetings to be able to occur in close proximity to where we're actually working without interrupting those that are trying to focus nearby. Choice is a huge issue. What we're finding is employees with choice on when and where they want to work are actually seen as more innovative and higher performing. And those that their employers provide that choice are actually reporting being able to focus 7% better than those without choice. Well-being is one of those newly emerging issues that we're seeing in the workplace. And we're not just talking about health and wellness, but well-being, which is physical, mental, and social. And that's starting to have some real design performance issues that are in a positive way on the work environment. Purpose. Dan Pink wrote a terrific book called Drive about what motivates us, and he found that it's not external rewards like money, but more internal rewards of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And being a part of a cause greater than yourself is definitely one of those drivers of purpose. And lastly, being part of a community. Gallup has done quite a lot of research over decades around employee engagement, and they have been doing quite a number of surveys. And in one of their recent surveys, they found that only 35% of workers feel that they have a sense of community at work. And when you stop and think about, this is the knowledge economy, it's all about ideas and information, being part of a community takes on an increasing importance. So how do we achieve these things in our space design, and how do we create workplaces that people really want to be in? We've been posing this question at Gensler for a number of years, and we stepped back since 2005, and we've been doing a lot of independent and formal research around this topic. And what we found is that design really matters. The design of workplace impacts performance, employee engagement, and innovation. And so what I'm going to share with you are a number of workplace projects and case studies that start to address the functional spaces that people need, some of the key spatial attributes that people want, and some of the emotional qualities that people desire that may not be apparent in spaces, but you kind of know it and feel it when it's there. So it all starts with function. And as I mentioned before, we spend about half of our time in focus. And fundamentally, we need places that people can really focus. As we've been studying this over the last 5 years, particularly looking at 2008 to 2013, we have found that there's been a decline in space effectiveness to be able to focus. And we have found that the time spent in focus has actually gone up. We're seeing that over half the people feel like they're being disturbed when they're trying to focus, and there are a lot of people trying to make makeshift solutions to kind of block out those distractions. You need places to collaborate in our work environments. We're finding that only 1 in 4 workplaces actually balance both focus and collaboration. That means providing available spaces to collaborate in close proximity to where we're working and still be able to not bother those that are trying to focus. We're finding that now a number of companies have actually shifted to greater number of virtual collaboration than face-to-face collaboration. In fact, we've been tracking this on a number of clients, and we're finding on average about 25% or 1 in 4 of the meeting participants are now virtual. But over the last year, as I've been informally asking this question, we're starting to work with a number of clients that now 50% are virtual, which means that the technology has got to be in these rooms, has got to be very easy. It's ubiquitous. You're able to move your devices from information from one device fluidly to another device and be able to continually work. And lastly, we need places to gather and connect. There's a huge value on these collision spaces that various departments can start to come together, and starting to think about how do you actually plan for inconveniences to get people up and moving and starting to bump into one another so that you're able to have that impromptu knowledge sharing that organizations so desperately want. And we know that organizations, just like individuals, don't all work the same. There's not a one-size-fits-all. There are corporate culture issues, there's work process issues, there's personality issues with every organization that needs to be taken into account. But if you're able to provide this right mix of focus spaces, collaborative spaces, and these social spaces, what we have found is that right mix can start to drive a higher job satisfaction. And so what do you need to be able to do in order to provide this right mix? Well, part of the solution is the ability to tailor your space. This is actually Facebook headquarters, and you will see that this is an area that was designed for a team, and yet the team itself can start to look at how do you tailor the layout and configuration, what this one woman needs and kind of these coral pants underneath the mascot that's hanging from the ceiling is more of a standing space, while other people may have sitting spaces. They're able to kind of turn and move of whether they're going to look up and connect with team members or need to turn their back to them in order to focus. This is all the ability to be able to move very rapidly. The space is very agile, and you'll even see that a lot of the power is coming from the ceiling to allow that quick response of how they wanted to change their space. Gensler has been working with CBRE Workplace 360 Group to design their own offices nationwide, and they're actually looking at how do we provide a wide variety of space. There's actually 15 different space types. They don't have assigned desk, and they're actually moving to the type of space they need for that particular point in time based on the activity that needs to occur. We've been measuring this for a number of different clients, and what we're finding on average is that individual desks in private offices are unoccupied 62% of the time. So how could you start to reallocate the space to provide all these choices to better align with how people are working today? So let's now talk about some of the attributes that people want in their workspace. Probably the most cited is natural light and view to the outside. Glass walls for transparency don't only bring in sunlight into the space, but they also allow people to see which rooms are available and be able to connect with one another. Stairs are another way to visually and physically connect between floors. The more open they are, they can also encourage more use to keep people active, which promotes physical well-being, but also encourages people to see one another that may not normally run into each other during the day. In terms of physical activity, treadmill workstations are gaining popularity as a supplemental kind of work setting. Often these are shared on a floor or between buildings, but we're also seeing standing meetings becoming a great way to not only stay fit, but also keep status meetings really as short as possible, as well as accommodate quick impromptu meetings. You've probably also heard sitting is the new smoking and all the health consequences of sitting too long. Well, standing desk are one way of being able to kind of combat sitting or at least be able to change your position throughout the day. And we're starting to see new spaces provide standing desks for absolutely everyone. But at a minimum, we're starting to see these being also shared as just an alternate place to work. This happens to be McDermott, Will, and Emery's space here in DC, and they actually provided that for all the private offices. So every building has several sets of exit stairs for safe evacuation. And so what we're seeing in new buildings and even some existing ones is trying to activate these stairs to be able to encourage more use between floors or between buildings or as a part of a walking meeting route. Think about how to use the whole building as your workplace. Outfitting outdoor terraces with Wi-Fi and power to be used as supplemental meetings in nice weather or just a quiet place to focus can really give some people a change of venue that can help with innovative thinking. In D.C., just actually last week, President Obama signed a law regarding penthouses and the use of penthouses in the district that can now be used as occupiable space. In the past, it could only be used for equipment. And so building owners are now exploring how to make use of this newfound square footage for conference rooms, for cafes, outdoor work, and even entertaining spaces. So the last few project images are more kind of emotional or inspirational in nature and how the workplace itself can start to express its mission, purpose, and values in the space in more subtle and kind of authentic ways. This is an interactive wall for Outsell, which is an advertising agency, and these are actually tiles. They're independent little cubes, if you will, that are black and white that you can turn around and start to create a new pattern on the wall. This happens to be their logo. They've actually, when they've done a pitch, they've actually put the prospective client logo right on that wall, and it's a great interactive way of being able to communicate what's important to them. Facebook took a very different approach. They partnered with local artists to create artwork throughout their headquarter campus, which uniquely expressed what Facebook is all about. And in addition, they allowed their employees to take part, so the space itself is continually evolving and changing, not unlike the Facebook site itself. And Olson is a different ad agency located in Minneapolis, and they are all about connections, and you can see that their space authentically reflects their purpose, and it resonated both with their employees and started to communicate what their values are all about, but it also communicated that to potential hires and even their clients. So the last project I'll share is Gensler's DC office, where I'm located. And this last fall, we expanded and renovated our own space, and we tried to incorporate many of the functions and attributes that I've been talking about up until this point. And so what we actually did, we were located on the 2nd floor and part of the 5th, and originally these bottom two ground level was 2 vacated restaurants, and they had been vacated for quite a while. And so we took over those spaces, and we put a new entry direct off the street to our own space. And that allowed us to start to connect with the community, feel a part of the streetscape, and really start to showcase what we were all about. And as you walked into our this vacated restaurant space, it became our front door. And if you can see in the in kind of the center of the slide, that's actually an amazing cappuccino machine that is located right in our lobby. It is the hubbub of our space. Everyone, all the employees come down there. We huddle in the morning. We're bumping into one another. It is really that area that we're able to share information, what's going on in our day, bump into one another and share information. And yet we share with our clients and bump into clients and vendors and reps that are coming in throughout the day. It is really the heartbeat of our office. And as you start to see the stairs off to the left, those carry up to the second floor. So we've got people working on the first floor, we've got people working on the second floor, and we carved out a really open staircase that allows us to visually connect and feel connected between both these floors. And yet it's great overflow space as well. And this is a view looking at the second floor. So we carved out a wide range of collaborative spaces. These are outfitted so we can walk in with our laptop, just put that information right up on the monitor, be able to share that virtually. Oftentimes we'll be collaborating with other offices or clients that are not in our space. And that art wall that you see to the left is our version of some of that community art wall. We actually all took turns painting that and adding what Gensler meant to us and what is we do at Gensler. And as we pulled off the blue tape, that it started to reveal that this is actually the plan, the circle that is just a block away from our own office, and this is actually the streetscape that is where our office is located. And at the other end of the floor plate, we actually have a different wall that's talking about the passions that each one of us has as individuals that we bring to Gensler and start to really have a place that expresses who we are as people. And all of these walls will continually change as we live in our space, and it keeps it fresh and evolving. So just in conclusion, one of the ways that we start to think about space is thinking about them as a set or series of experiences. So the top two are really around function. So how do we focus and collaborate and build in choice to allow us to do those things that we need to do? The second row is really around those attributes, again, daylight and views and well-being, and how do we start to bring those into those experiences that we're scripting. And lastly, how do we bring in emotion to the space? So how do we start to authentically talk about purpose and mission and values and really make the space an inspiring space that we all gravitate to as people? So I'm going to leave you with kind of 3 keys to success. The first one is how do we align space policy and tools to support how we're working? And second, how do we include people in that process so they feel vested in the solution? Third is how do we emphasize what people are getting in the new space, not what they're giving up, so they feel like there's a real benefit to the new space. Fourth, make sure that you're piloting in new ideas as living labs, even during construction, so that you're bringing people along. And Cheryl's going to talk about this a little bit more as part of the change management. And fifth, how do we learn and adapt so that you're asking, you're listening, and you're measuring the results, but then keep that as a continual dialogue so that you're able to future-proof anything that you're doing in the workspace so that the space can evolve as the work continues to evolve. As we've been stepping back and looking at how much change has occurred in terms of technology and the way we're working the last 5 years, you can only imagine that we're going to have as much or more the next 5 years. So lastly, if you think about a new way of working and a strategy for new ways of working, and if you're able to couple that with new business strategy, it can really transform an organization. And to me, that's the biggest opportunity to work differently. So with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Well, Janet, what a fascinating set of both insights and examples. And I can't tell you how exciting it is. I love to see the examples, what's really occurring there in the front lines. And you've always got some of the best possible pictures showing off the design and the people utilizing that space. So I'm going to remind everybody to go ahead and type in their questions now. So we got our cues in a first come, first serve kind of order for the end. I've actually written down a couple of questions for Janet myself, trying to dig into more of how did you learn that, and what were the results from that particular kind of design. We were scheduled to have Mark Smith, the Director of Operations and Security from Noblis, sharing their examples from within their organization, specifically around their Innovation Center. And we were able to get his permission to go ahead and present that material. I'm going to do the best job that I can and field a couple of questions, as we've done a couple of interviews with Mark so far. Certainly, if there are questions that you have about the Innovation Center and how Noblis is accommodating the needs of their kind of unique workforce, I'll be happy to pass them along to Mark and make sure that we get those answers disseminated out to everyone. Just really quickly, Noblis is a pretty typical client for us. It's a fairly large organization with a large workforce of knowledge workers. In this particular case, Noblis workforce is a lot of scientists, a lot of technically oriented engineers and strategists who are working on science-oriented questions, infrastructure-oriented questions, intelligence sector questions, specifically for the public, for government. They're headquartered just outside of D.C. And one of the things that Mark was tasked with, and I think this is right along the lines of Janet's kind of opportunity for transformation here. The organization itself is a nonprofit aimed at serving the public, has the great ability to turn to its Director of Operations and say, we want our workplace to be as innovative as possible, and we want to make sure that we have a high level of engagement with our workers, with the people who are here. And that particular workforce, being scientists, and knowledge workers, they tend to focus on their problems. One of the things that Mark pointed out was our workforce really likes to solve stuff, and we find that they will just stare at a computer screen and work with whatever tool or data that they're working on. And they're perfectly happy to do that at home or in a cubicle somewhere, because really the tools and the data and their work environment is really right there inside the computer, which is fantastic for productivity. But what they were experiencing and what they wanted to improve was the innovation, the things that happen when two people who are working side by side but not necessarily working together lack when they're just staring at a computer screen or working on their own. So Mark's kind of job, and it's an exciting job, is to try out new things and to create a place where all this innovation can occur. And the photos that we have here are of a fairly secure area within their building. We had to go through a lot of security and some preparation to allow us to share these photos with you. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is the glass area that's in the back side of this photo. This entire floor has very few opaque walls, and what they've done is they've created these smaller group offices, mostly because of the sensitivity of the projects themselves. So the group that's working on a particular project for a customer is all within one particular area, but it's glass walls. So just like Janet was saying, with carrying the light and being able to see other people around and fostering that idea of a community, that you're not just a single person working on a problem, but you're in an environment, you're in a community, you're in a group that's working on problems together, is really enhanced by the glass and the transparency. The thing that you probably can't see from this picture is there's a bunch of little Post-it notes that are posted directly on the glass. There's also lots and lots of what would otherwise be dry erase marker written on a whiteboard that's been written all over these glass walls. So as people are, looking up from their monitors, as they are standing up and walking outside their office, they are literally faced with all of the work that they've just done, all of the collaboration they just had, all the ideas and brainstorming they passed back and forth from one member of a team to another member of a team. A really rich and innovative environment for getting people to think and talk and have ideas together versus just work individually and alone. This also represents kind of a change to open workspaces, and I'm sure that Janet can tell us a lot about the benefits of having people work literally side by side on a workspace as opposed to kind of heads down inside of a cubicle. So they also wanted to make sure that this office environment was easy for people to choose to work there. So while they're using hoteling and they're measuring how they're using the space, they wanted to make sure that for the times that somebody wants to come into the office to accomplish something, that there was very little getting in the way of doing that. So they intentionally dedicated a certain area for using free address, and this of course can be measured free address, but a place where if somebody wants to come in and sit down, where they don't need the security of that particular group's glass office environment, it was very easy for them just to come in, plop down at a particular desk. They don't have to do anything in order to use it. They can use it for a few minutes and then move on to whatever meeting or other work that they're going to be doing. Again, this is right smack in the middle of this very transparent, very active, easy to see other people environment. The entire floor is wrapped in windows and lots of light coming in. They're in the midst of an office park that has lots and lots of trees, so it's a very inviting environment. It's very different from an artificial cube farm of any kind. They also make it a really desirable and attractive kind of place to be, place to go, because immediately as you enter this innovation center, there's this very modern, kind of hip-looking bar area that when I very first saw it, I assumed that, hey, this is something they used for after hours for parties or get-togethers. But as Mark explained it, this is a very specific, purpose-oriented environment and furniture so that people, as they are coming into the office, as they are kind of on their way to the glass office for their individual group, they've got the opportunity to just kind of sit down for a minute to set down their PC, speak to somebody else that's working on a different project that they passed by. This is where they locate all the amenities. They've got a kind of a fancy coffee machine. They've got free vending machines with snacks and candy. And this particular bar has got these big giant video screens that are dual purpose. Normally they're running some kind of educational video loop or something about a project they're working on right now, but they're intentionally designed so that somebody who has stopped by and sat down on this bar or talking to somebody else, connecting their laptop or their tablet to one of these video screens to share information, to share some kind of finding or share some kind of spreadsheet with somebody else, share some kind of video is extremely easy to do. And because it's in this open area that people walk through as they go from the entryway doors to their individual offices, the chance of somebody else seeing that, seeing what somebody else is talking about, what somebody else is collaborating on, just dramatically increases the likelihood that there's going to be some kind of innovative spark, innovative discussion, or one of the collisions that Janet was talking about within her slides. It's a very attractive place to go. It's strategically placed so that people have to walk through it, and it's set up to foster that high degree of communication even between people outside of the same group. Now these particular knowledge workers are also very keen on learning things. They're definitely those folks that they're knowledge seekers, not just knowledge workers. So they knew that one of the important things in the Innovation Center would be sharing knowledge, doing presentations, and some kind of training. So literally at the core, at the middle of this Innovation Center, where everybody has to walk, there's a kind of a medium-sized presentation area with a very large screen for presentations, lots of AV equipment to make it very easy to deliver some kind of knowledge, some kind of learning, some kind of result from a project. It's kind of in the path of everybody. It is very open. There's only one wall to it, and that's the wall that has the actual screen. So just casually walking by this area where a presentation is going on, you're going to get involved in it. You're going to consume some part of it and benefit. If not, turn right around and sit down for a few minutes to learn something brand new. Now, they also were very purposeful in their design for this. If I've been setting up some kind of presentation area, I would have been expecting that there's a person up front and they're doing a one-way delivery of some kind of material. They're probably not going to be sitting down. They're probably going to be standing up at a podium or standing next to a screen. But because Noblis uses so much virtual collaboration and so many opportunities for people to meet, they intentionally set up the front of this room so that all that exact same video equipment can be reused for impromptu meetings amongst a much smaller set of folks. So when this presentation area is not in use for a training session, all that equipment is available to be used for any kind of meeting, whether or not that's just local people or introducing the 1 to, I guess, a quarter to 50% virtual meeting attendees, as Janet's data is starting to show. So it's designed for being used in more than just one way. And then as we zoom the photo out, I don't know if you could see this from the earlier one, but at the back edge of this training area, this presentation area, there's some additional seating. There's some kind of high cafe-style seats that typically people would just use for some kind of collaboration, just real quick, informal. We're going to sit down and talk about something on our way to a meeting or on our way to our office. But because these are designed this way, it'd be very easy for somebody who just want to sit in for a few minutes and not disturb the presentation. Very easy for them to consume that exact same kind of information, whether it's a training or some kind of results delivery. So they've done a great job here of catering to the needs or the desires of the workforce that's going to be in here. They made it very easy for this investment in technology and audiovisual equipment to be reused for lots of reasons. And they've used that exact same set of furniture to foster some more meetings, whether or not they need a lot of virtual equipment or it's just kind of an informal, casual, hey, let's go talk about this for a second kind of meeting. Fascinating stuff. And a huge amount of the work that they do there, they're trying out lots of ideas, they're trying out lots of experiments. Mark and his team are always trying out something new. They spend a lot of time listening to what their workers have to say. They intentionally create opportunities for people to tell them how are we doing, what more do you need. And one of the big pieces of feedback that they got, or a great example of it, was they said, yeah, you know, we need some kind of medium-sized meeting rooms, but we don't really want a table. We want some more easier, less formal, casual kind of places to meet. So Mark and his team created a couple of these spaces, and they added, instead of chairs, they put in couches. And then they put a lot of the technology in there to allow the virtual stuff to occur, to allow the support for the meetings to happen. And they had okay utilization of those spaces, but it wasn't what they were expecting. When they went back to the staff who actually asked for this particular kind of space, they discovered that the couches, while it was a really good idea, there was some psychological barrier for business people, for colleagues, for coworkers to sit right next to each other on kind of a couch, just a very informal kind of couch. So with that feedback, they said, we're going to change the kind of couch that we use here. We're going to switch to, and Janet, you probably know this better than Mark or I, the type of couch that has some physical barriers. It's got a padded arm between it. Still has the comfort and kind of the look of the couch, but has that psychological comfort zone of, I'm on a couch, but it's still segregated. I'm not sitting right next to my business colleague. I'm comfortable, but we still have that kind of formal separation. And because of that, this is now the single most popular collaboration area within Noblis, within the Innovation Center. And if I remember correctly, they had some kind of measurement for productivity as well. The productivity coming out of this is the highest they have. So the feedback that they're getting comes from monthly town hall meetings where everybody in the company is allowed to attend these meetings and just be open and candid about what's working, what isn't working, what ideas are they going to try next, and some feedback on those ideas. And that kind of regular communication back and forth between the workforce and their needs and the organization that's supplying them has yielded a lot of really interesting new ideas that have very clear impacts and very clear improvements in productivity, in collaboration, and innovation. If you look at the rest of their meeting spaces, this is This is something that kind of really surprised me because I knew that this was happening some degree, but I didn't realize that organizations were doing this as much. They spend a lot of their effort on making sure that the office itself supports whatever the workers, the people there need, whether that's getting their work done or collaborating. They want to make sure that it's easy in any one of these spaces for people to accomplish their tasks, for people to communicate, collaborate. So every single one of the rooms has some kind of virtual setup, some kind of video telepresence setup. It's all set up the exact same way. They're all interchangeable, interoperable. And when we were talking about having this webinar in our annual conference, Mark was quick to offer his space because of the fact that this is all using the latest standards and it's very interoperable equipment. It's very easy for people outside this organization, once they're allowed to communicate with these little teams of people, these individual workers, because every single space is equipped with it. So that just tells the employees that this is a place that it's easy to work. It's desirable to be there because things are easy and there's all the high tech that I need to accomplish whatever I need to accomplish. And actually it helps as signs to prospective employees to show this company invests heavily in making the environment within the office itself very easy for people to do work, for people to be productive, for people to communicate and work with one another. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that as Cheryl talks a bit about talent acquisition and making the workplace attractive for people who aren't working there just yet. And then lastly, on the high-tech side, Noblis is doing an awful lot to measure how that space is being used. And one of the big questions I had for Janet was how you're able to tell, A, that the space is utilized, and then B, kind of how is that space used when it is utilized. When you walk around within the Innovation Center, there is clear signs that there's technology deployed to make this measurement easy, to make the use of the space really easy, and all that data is being reviewed by Mark and his team on a regular basis to see of all these experiments and ideas that we're trying, which ones are working, which ones aren't working. I think your term was living labs, where you're very quickly looking at the data that's coming in and probably making some adjustments. But some really fascinating things are possible once you actually start measuring how people are using the space that you've created and provided for them. And lastly, I just wanted to share some of the ideas that Noblis is trying out now, and some of the things that sound not crazy perhaps, but really kind of unusual. But once you listen to it and understand what the purpose is, it actually seems to make a lot of sense. They have I think it's 600 people who are at this particular facility, so they've got a fairly sizable cafeteria, a very nice place. It's got the kind of typical cafeteria tables. They've made sure that it has the same kind of glass walls that face the outside that the Innovation Center has. So it's a nice place to sit down and have your lunch. But it's got a patio right outside, so as long as the weather is okay, people quickly walk right outside on the patio and enjoy lunch, enjoy a nice lunch right there at work. They can continue their work or their conversation with colleagues. They also have daycare there on site, and the patio for the cafeteria is located right next to where the daycare is. So it should be pretty easy for people to see that there's children here. It might even be my kids that are playing there. Makes it a much different environment than just purely a place to do work. And then the kind of the crazy idea at first that suddenly makes an awful lot of sense. Mark started a program of Treat Wednesdays. And what that means is every Wednesday, I think it's 2:30 in the afternoon, the organization pays the cafeteria to create some kind of exotic treat. Let's say some kind of unique ice cream dessert that's offered only in the cafeteria at 2:30 on Wednesdays. The result of this is they've got an awful lot of people from very different programs, very different departments, who all have to go down to the cafeteria, enjoy this free dessert from the organization, and do so while they're sitting next to somebody else within the cafeteria. It seems like such a simple idea to bring a bunch of people that would not have otherwise worked together or spoken together down to a very casual, casual, informal kind of environment, again, to foster the sparks of innovation and the things that happen when you have collisions. Very cool idea. I kind of wish that we were doing it here at AgilQuest. And I'll leave you with the last kind of most outlandish kind of idea, but every single person that I've heard Mark say this to, and certainly the people we shared it with, just thought, wow, what an interesting idea. They are planning on experimenting with no internal email day. This would be one day a week where the IT department makes it so that you can't send emails back and forth to people within your building. You can still send and receive emails from everybody outside of your building, but you can't send email to the person that you're working with just right around the corner on the next floor. If you want to communicate with them, you actually have to pick up the phone, or better yet, get up out of your seat and go down and talk to them. This is a fantastic idea, just a really, really unusual thing that's very easy to do on the IT side, and fairly easy to measure what kind of change does it have, what kind of impact does it have. I'm really keen to hear, Mark, perhaps he'll share it with us at the annual conference of September. So an enormous number of ideas specifically around making your environment a lot more innovative, from the collisions and kind of the communication that you're forcing to happen, or you're pushing people towards happening, that will cause that kind of extra productivity and collaboration. So we've heard a bunch of ideas. We certainly started off with a lot of really good research and data and insight from Janet and Gensler on what kinds of things people need and what kinds of changes will help result in the environment that they want to work in. A lot of these changes are resulting in really good benefits, really good impacts, but to keep them running, to keep them going, to have them have long-term impact, you've got to make sure that the change that you're doing, your change that you're engaging in within the organization is following some kind of process. It's being measured, is being propagated, is being communicated. And now we've got Cheryl Duvall from Avant to help us understand how do you choose when to use change management, when is it appropriate, and what are some of the great ways to communicate all these changes that you've made out to your population, out to the workforce. So Cheryl, you ready to take it over?
Okay, thank you, Doug. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll begin with this quote. As designers, we prepare space for the people. As change managers, we prepare people for the space. And I think this is a simple and elegant way to describe the complex job of change management. And I heard Frank Duffy share this quote a couple years ago when he was speaking about architects and interior designers that prepare space for the people, yet often overlook the need for change management to really help people understand how to use that space. And I think this is especially critical for any of us who are tasked with managing new construction or renovation projects. The very success of those projects, as we all know, is not just delivering the project on time and within budget, but ensuring that people will be productive in the new space from day one. So that's really what we're really tasked to do. So a question to ask ourselves is, well, how big is your cultural change, and does it warrant a change management program at all? And so to help people understand this, I've identified 5 levels, what I call levels of change management. The first 2, minimal and light, are really more communications type of programs. They're not really full-on change management programs. And truthfully, I've never done a level 1, and I've only done a level 2 once. So most of my work as a change manager has been in the levels 3 to 4 to 5. And in 3, as a moderate, this is really to support workplace changes that might be regarded as new for the staff that have been there. I just did a big government project a few years ago. Some of the staff had worked in the same building for 30 years. So what had become mainstream in recent 10 to 15 years was still very new to them. So that was big cultural change for them, like to move them out of private offices into open workstations, for example. An intense kind of level 4 change management would be when there's definite cultural transformation, and you've seen several good examples of that Doug just showed with Noblis, and many that Janet shared in her slides, where the majority of workers are going to experience a new way of working. Now, for some, it might actually be a level 5, where it's much more comprehensive. It's a significant cultural change. So what might be significant for Noblis in the way that they opened up the space and they had it transparent with a lot of glass and people could see each other. In Facebook, you know, where they've already been working like that, that might not be very significant for them, right? So every organization has their own, what is significant for us? How big is that cultural change for us? And so I recently did a level, what I would call level 3. It was not extremely, in my mind, very big cultural change. A bunch of engineers that were occupying 96 square foot workstations, and their architect was trying to get them to go down to 80 square feet workstations. And in their architect's dream, it would be a 64 square foot workstation. And we know with IFMA, a 48 square foot workstation is typical these days. But again, that was big cultural change for that one organization. So we need to sort of look at each organization separately and differently and determine, does this warrant a change management program? So, and I just have devised these 5 levels to help people you know, talk about it and be able to describe something. Law firm we're working with right now is cutting their files down to only a third of what they currently have, paper files. They consider that a level 5. However, their workstations and offices are going down in size 2. They said that's really like a level 3. All right, so you can have different levels even within the same project. So when we think about change management, and we really describe change management as leading from a current state to the desired future state, we need to understand, you know, it's like, why do we even need change management in workplace design? And there are 3 main reasons that change management can communicate the reasons behind the change to facilitate acceptance. We'll all be able to accept things more readily if we understand the why behind it. We also know that involving the staff in identifying the issues and the solutions and also communicating any concerns back and forth is very important for you know, leading change management. And what also happens with the change management program is it really alerts senior leadership to important issues for early resolution. And I can't emphasize enough about how important this is. A lot of times the leaders making the decisions in a project are not really that in tune to sometimes what the frontline staff is going through. It's a really recent example. The architect had specified refrigerators and separate ice makers so that the refrigerators would not have a freezer compartment. And when we were sharing this during a change management meeting, people found out about when they were in uproar because so many of the staff brought frozen dinners because they used them. They had to work a lot of late nights, and they brought those in. And so we didn't even know that that was an issue. So alerting that early saved a lot of money down the road because they were able to change the specs with the GC before they had even ordered the appliances. So that's one small example, but there are so many that I can share about how we find out things very early in the process that alert senior leadership to something that really might be costly in several ways down the road. And the other thing that we look for is the added value that change management is for both the leaders and the staff. So number 1, a change management program centralizes all the communications for the project regarding that change. And by doing that, it maintains the high productivity, not only for the staff, but also for the leaders. So if you can imagine, and you've probably witnessed, when the rumor mill is at work and people say, oh my gosh, did you hear no one's going to have a private office, or half of us are, and we don't know if it's going to be me or not. So there's all these kind of rumors that can happen. And so a change management process enables people to come to one source to get the answers. That also means that the leaders aren't caught up in all of that. So I once had a chief of staff say to me, my gosh, the day we announced that there was a change management program, I gained 2 hours back a day because he had been so embroiled in emails and phone calls and answering people's questions. And once we announced the change management project, that was my job to take that heat off of him. And so that really helped a great deal. The other thing, and Doug alluded to this earlier, is this retaining and recruiting valuable staff. When you have a change management program, even if you just save 1 or 2 people from leaving because they were upset about what was happening, you've paid for the change management program right there, just in that. The other thing we've witnessed is when they're recruiting valuable staff and they find out that the candidates that are interviewing find out that there is a change management program, it tells them that, wow, this organization really cares about their people. And so it actually is a very good recruiting tool as well. So it promotes goodwill. It does empower the staff to change their perspective to a more holistic view. It's not just about me. Let's understand what this is doing for our entire organization. And obviously it eases the emotional transition to a different work culture. So how does it actually get implemented? Well, we always say that it really should parallel the design and construction schedule very closely. So we want to make sure that the communications are timely and relevant to what's going on. We can also work with the architect and interior designer to say, are there any points along the way where the staff could participate in some design decisions? Narrow it down to 3 different color schemes and let them pick the one, and it could be the leadership is already blessed and said, okay, any of those 3 work. Maybe, let's let the staff decide. And anytime that's done, even if it's just for a small part of the project, not the entire project, but the restrooms, for example, whatever it is, it can go a long way. And then we plan the communications plan in any of the events, town hall meetings, anything to parallel that schedule. And so I often get asked, well, what are the first steps? Let's say we buy in that we need change management because our cultural change is big enough for our organization. We understand, the benefits of it, but what happens? Like, what's the first thing? And so always it has to be that the senior management and leadership must support and endorse that change management effort. Absolutely, without a doubt. They've got to be visible about it, they've got to be vocal about it, and they have to tell people and tell them again and again. And once we have that support, we also work with senior leadership to say, okay, let's outline what are the change management goals. How are we going to know if we're successful? What's our scope? Because that's going to also define our scope. And then when I do a change management program, I never do it without a change agent committee. That's non-negotiable for me. We need to appoint a change agent committee specifically for this purpose. They shouldn't have any other role. This is their job, and we ask them to be a diverse mix of people. We want them resistors to change as well as early adapters to change, because if you can change those resistors to change and get them to start embracing this, a lot of other people start taking note. We want them cross-functional. We want them representing all of the departments that are going to be involved in the move. And we want them to make sure they understand that they are liaison. They're bringing things to us as the overall change agent committee and facilitators, and they're going to take those issues and things they learn at our meetings back to those departments. So it's a two-way street. And then with their help, we launch a change management communications plan, making sure we're using lots of different ways of communicating to people and involving the change agent committees in that themselves. So one of the things that I tell people when we talk about, well, what are the steps to creating change? I say, well, John Cotter has written a lot of books about this, and so I've actually based the way that I approach change management on his 8 steps to creating change. And the first one is establish a sense of urgency. And all of us that are in the design and construction business know that that's pretty easy to do in the kind of work that we do, because generally there is a deadline, and we know we're moving in 3 years or we're moving in 9 months or whatever it is. What we need to do is make sure that everyone else feels that sense of urgency, because if it's a 3-year project, that could make it sound like it's really far away, when in fact we need to back up several of those milestones to get people to understand why we need to start working on change right now. And I'll share more about that in a minute. We need to create a guiding coalition. That's usually that senior leadership group that's going to be in charge of the change management process and delegate that work to other people, but they're the ones that have the vision and the goal of what we're trying to do. And then we develop that vision and strategy with their help. We have to communicate that change vision. And then that step number 5 is that, again, non-negotiable for me, empower broad-based action. That to me means let's get people that are frontline and going to be the most affected by this change, and have a committee of them, usually about 12 to 18 people, that are going to work with us, and we're going to empower them, and then they're going to go off and empower other people. And they're going to help us understand where are some short-term wins. what could we do to bring people on board pretty quickly. We're going to then consolidate and build on those wins, and then we're going to help use them to help us anchor the new approaches and make it stick. And that might mean developing workplace guidelines, etiquette guidelines, purge campaigns, other things that make people understand what changes are coming and how we're going to make that stick moving on. And so really briefly, how to change behavior through change management would be involve the stakeholders, communicate often and differently. You have to communicate many different ways. Recognize that many behaviors are habits and they're comfortable actions over many years. And so we need to work with people and help them understand some of the behaviors that are going to need to change and what those desired behaviors are. And then make the change at the time of the move. It's a natural break from the past. So it's a perfect time to make all of the changes, behavior changes that need to happen, and then reinforce that behavior through the workplace etiquette guidelines, through educating people, and through enforcing. And that does include a moratorium on change. And Janet and I were just talking about this the other day in prep for this. 3 to 4 months after the move, you don't allow anyone to make changes. And she was sharing how a group was, they had transparency, a lot of glass, and they were going to come back in and put the film on later. And after they had lived with it for 3 months, they decided, you know what, we don't need that film. You know, so those are the things that we're trying to reinforce is this is new behavior. It's going to be different, and it's okay. Let's just live with it for a little bit, and then we'll decide if we need to make any tweaks or changes to that. So I wanted to share a little bit about how it's important to align the change management with the project schedule. This is just one example, and I know it might be a little hard to see, but what happens here is like this phase right here is the construction documents phase, and then there's the contract administration phase, and this goes off and off and off your slide over to the right. But this is the longest time, the contract administration, when the construction's happening and the furniture is being specified and ordered and manufactured and it hasn't come in yet. That is a very long time to wait, and that's exactly the time that we need to be doing the most to get people to start thinking about how their behaviors are going to change, how the space is going to be very different, and we align activities and focus groups and town hall meetings and surveys and other things that happen during this process to keep people engaged while that long wait is happening. We were also mentioning the other day that many governments might have delays to their projects for whatever reason, and so that keeping people engaged and hopeful and understanding that and they can't go into denial. It is going to happen. The change will be here, and some of the behaviors that we can start modifying and preparing people for before that. And one of the best ways to do that is to really, if we begin the change management process very early during programming phase and before schematic design phase, then we can actually try out some of the new concepts with pilot projects. And these projects can be very, very key to the success. With Haynes Brands, Inc., they had a new CEO, 2,200 people, 840 of them were in private offices. New CEO came in and said, take them all down. He originally said, take them all down to 0. No private office period, including for me. And he tested that with his own space, took 7,000 square feet in the executive area, and another division that was 25,000 square feet, and said, let's test all of our ideas in these two spaces totaling 38,000 square feet, and we'll see how people feel about it. They issued a survey after the pilot projects. The pilot projects were delivered in 100 days, 100 nights. It was a very fast project, and it needed to be because they needed to move on and have the decisions and the concepts either affirmed or tweaked after the pilot so that they could move on to their new construction and renovation projects. So he wanted it fast. He wanted to ask people how they felt about it. They opened up the pilot spaces for everyone in the company to tour, and people could go online and vote and talk about what they felt. 70% of those that answered the survey said that they would not return to the space that they had occupied before. And this was very huge and very key because that CEO ended up leaving less than a year later, and CEOs number 2 and number 3 came in and could not change the tide. So CEO number 3 did put in 11 private offices, but other than that, everything else stayed, and the concepts held true. So it was really just a remarkable indication to me that the pilot projects are really, really important. And if you can start early, then you have those as a benefit for starting early. So I'm going to wrap up with a few ideas regarding change management deliverables. A lot of people often say, so what's involved in a change management program? And we only had a few minutes to share some of this with you today. We've mentioned town hall meetings. I know that Noblis did those. Many companies, that's a perfect time for leaders to get out in front and talk to the staff about what's coming. We often know that mock-ups are important. Let's mock it up. If we can do a pilot project, that's great. If not, let's just mock up a couple workstations so people can kick the tires and understand what that's about. We've done trivia contests to engage people during that long wait during the contract administration. We've done time capsules where you have every single department collect something that's indicative of their department that's current, and then you put it in a time capsule and you bury that somewhere in the interior construction. So there are all sorts of ways to engage and empower people during that change management process. And I wanted to leave you with a couple of visuals of what that might look like. Every change management program that I've worked with, we brand it. It's really important to brand it so that people understand what they're, every time they see that logo, they see those words, they relate it to a certain change management, the process that we're doing. So these are all different ones that we've used from this. Renovation 360 was a group that was moving to a swing space for 2 years and then having to move back. And so they called it Renovation 360. And the tagline that says, "Are we there yet?" changed to, "Here we come," or "We're back," or wherever we were in the process. Intranet site. Every single change management program I've done in the last 5 or 6 years has included an intranet site, and that's the place that we post our meeting summaries of the change agent committees. We post frequently asked questions. We post the move schedule, anything. So it's the one source that people can go to and look for their answers. E-newsletters are very popular. So we used to do these in hard copies, but now it's e-newsletter. It might be emailed, so they get it through their email. And then maybe there's a question that's answered. We used to do that for the one that's there on the left, Virginia Department of Transportation. We did a question of the month that then the question was in the e-newsletter, but to get the answer, you had to go to the intranet site. So anything that sort of drives people to touch all of those communication vehicles. We also look for ways for people to participate in design decisions, as I mentioned before. This over here on the left is a chair survey that we did, and you can see that there were 6 chairs, and we asked them for first and second choices, and there were clearly 2 top choices, chair number 2 and chair number 5, and so they actually got one of those two choices. So we allowed people to participate in the actual design decisions. Purge campaigns are huge, and everybody needs to do this, just like if you were moving from your home to an office, you would want to, or moving your own home, you want to apply that same to moving offices. So let's try to get rid of what we need to and only move what we have to. Hard hat tours and beam signings are big, and so we bring people through, the change agent committee through on hard hat tours. You can see a beam signing there on the left. And on the right, we couldn't do a beam signing, but we could do a column signing. So we arranged that for the change agent committee members to come in and do that. So just some special activities. And finally, workplace etiquette guidelines. These are really big to have the groups themselves, the people themselves, draw up how they're going to, minimize distractions in the workplace, how they're going to use their telephones and protect their privacy, use collaborative spaces, anything along those lines that can be actually drafted by the people themselves. And so the top 5 mistakes that I would share related to change management is underestimating the significance of the change, not creating a separate change agent committee. Again, that's non-negotiable with me. Lack of senior leader endorsement, very important that you always have their endorsement, so absolutely must happen. Beginning the change management too late, as early as possible, but beginning when people are in the middle of contract documentation and the construction's about to start is too late. It really needs to begin much earlier. I prefer in programming at the latest schematic design, maybe early design development, but that's still pretty late. And then no change management despite huge change. There's still a lot of companies out there that do that are really embarking on some new ideas and some major transformation of their workplace, but yet they don't invest in a change management program. And we just see that as really being the biggest mistake that people make. So the critical components, and this is my last slide, is to really convey the clear vision and goals for change management, to make sure it's a top-down and bottom-up approach. You have the leader endorsement and you're empowering the people, and that you're aligning the change management with the project schedule, ideally to include pilot projects, that you're communicating all sorts of different ways and all the time, and you can't over-communicate, and then the active involvement of the change agent committee themselves. So those are the top 5 critical components that I see. So with that, Doug, I'll let you take.
Terrific, Cheryl. Thank you. Kind of just like with Janet, with the fascinating examples. For me, it's always so beneficial to see here's the real things, here's the real communication that's going on. We're only part of the change management process itself. So we rarely ever create any of those communication vehicles. Getting to see them, those purge stickers, they made sense instantaneously, but I've never seen them, and certainly you probably got dozens of things just like that that are helping the change and making it impactful and long-term and work well versus just an attempt or an experiment of a new idea that, while it was a great idea, it wasn't executed very well and didn't have the impact, it didn't have the lasting effect that it should for that kind of investment. Mm-hmm. So we're at the end of our presentation itself. Just a real quick summary. We heard that there's a brand new workforce out there. Certainly, we all have new needs within the office, and that there is benefit. There is a significant kind of impact at the right mix of space and the support and the kind of environment, and certainly how people are interacting and what their opportunities would have on not just productivity for the organization, but also engagement and satisfaction for the employees themselves. It's clear that Gensler's done a lot of work in the gathering of data and doing some analysis. I think that Janet's got some documents that she pointed out that we could all benefit from. There's lots of examples and experiences. The things we heard from both Janet and Cheryl, certainly the examples that Mark from Noblis shared with us, those are exactly the kinds of things, the conversations we have in the AgilQuest user group meetings with our customers, and then more broadly with everybody who's in the industry at our annual Agile Workplace Conference. On the change management side, this is kind of the first time I've ever seen really a gauge for how do we tell when it's appropriate to use change management, and do we really need it for everything? I think that'll help everybody focus really well on where to apply it and get the most benefit out of it. And then there's communication tools. Cheryl, we have to talk and find out how we can share some more of those examples very specifically with the programs that we know of. So now we'd like to move to some Q&A. We've already got quite a few questions from the audience out there. This is a great opportunity for you to use the little chat window or the Q&A window over on the right-hand side of your WebEx screen. Just type in your question. We'll take them and get through as many as we can while we've got the panelists here. I'll pose the questions, and Cheryl, you or Janet, whoever can answer them. When we run out of time, we'll just take the rest of the questions and try and answer them over email. So the very first question we have up here, what happens if we don't have any budget allocated to this? What should we do if there's no money set aside specifically for either change management or making dramatic changes to the design or the layout of the workplace? Any ideas?
Cheryl, you wanna go first?
Yeah,
You want me to?
I can go from a change management standpoint, as you can certainly try to do it internally. Obviously to hire an outside consultant is going to cost money, but if your organization can set aside, just understanding the process, doing the Cotter's 8 steps to change and figuring out how to involve people in that, you can certainly do this internally and not spend any outside money.
So I can address it from a design standpoint. Some of the ideas that we shared are pretty easy to implement when you relocate or expand, but there are things you can do to your existing space. So I would recommend that first walk around like you're an anthropologist and look for underutilized spaces that could be better utilized, and for how people are really working today. You might be able to set up with an alternate work setting, for example, that of something that you're running short on, like meeting space or just a quick huddle rooms and the like. You could use 3 high file cabinets for standing meetings, for example, so you might be able to even take your existing furniture and rearrange it or kind of repurpose. And I would look for how do you build in a little bit more flexibility. And for example, if you've got a lot of meeting rooms and some are in high use and some are in low use and it's due to the technology, then you might be able to get the right tools in the right spaces to better utilize the space. So I would first start by walking around and really taking note of what do you seem to be running short of, and what do you have too much of that is being underutilized, and see if you can make some very easy but low cost kind of changes.
And Janet, you're kind of echoing a lot of the input we hear at the beginning of a project, where somebody is recognize that they have a large degree of under or unused space, and they're either heading towards some kind of lease renewal where they've got to sign up for the right amount of space, and because those leases are so long in duration that the difference between 1,000 seats, signing up for 1,000 seats for 20 years or 500 seats for 20 years is in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Exactly. And so if you can step back and really take a hard and fast look and ask your employees what are the spaces that you don't use and what do you need more of. Chances are you can make some adjustments that really don't have to cost money and could actually save money over the long haul.
Interesting. And Cheryl, you mentioned the John Cotter book. That's actually one of my favorite books of all time. It's very concise and very direct and helpful, unlike so many other business books. That very first chapter you mentioned, the urgency one, I would guess that if somebody recognizes there's some kind of problem, there's some kind of deficiency, there's something that they are not doing to serve their workforce, and the workforce is the revenue-generating engine within the organization. So it's their work that produces the dollars on the left-hand side of the balance sheet. Whatever change, whatever you have to do to accommodate, to attract or keep or support that workforce should lead to some kind of urgency. There should be a competitive element in there, or a talent acquisition element, or a cost reduction element that if you recognize the problem and pursue it to a what should be urgent for this organization, there should be a C-level at some point who will be receptive to that and recognize either the opportunity or the peril of not making some kind of change.
Right. Usually it's a little more difficult when I do change management, it's related usually to a workplace redesign, right, or new construction. So where I see that the sense of urgency is tougher to get people to understand is if the project is 3 or 5 years out. It sounds really far for some people. So we have to break that up into milestones. So like that example I gave of the pilot project, it was a 3.5-year-long project, but we needed the decisions from the pilots immediately so that we could then design with that in mind. So we had to break everything into a smaller, like little milestones so that people understood why we had to do this right now in a really fast track, method.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
The next question here is, With a lot of the new workplace utilizing the open space and having kind of limited area in which you can focus, how do you design that space to best suit the people who mostly work behind a computer, or the people who are mostly on conference calls and need that focus area with less distractions? What happens when the individuals within the workforce outnumber those who need to collaborate or interact regularly?
Well, and so I'll jump in on, this is often kind of a key design question. So there's probably not a one-size-fits-all even across an organization. You're going to have certain functions that are far more intense focus, and you're going to have that maybe like the accounting group or financial functions. And you may have some groups that are much more collaborative, like sales or marketing. And so you're not going to have a universal layout that's going to absolutely work for everyone. So you're going to design some spaces that are more collaborative in nature, and people get up and they go to an alternate space when they really need that heads down focus work. And so they're going to go into a focus room, a huddle room, a quiet zone in order to get that done. And you'll also have the inverse, which I think the question was just describing, that you may have some areas that they all need to focus, in which case then that collaborative area should be in close proximity and the right size and configuration and outfitted for the kind of collaboration that also needs to take place. So you get up and go collaborate and let the others start to focus nearby. And so it's trying to find that right mix again for every department or group across the organization, but still build in enough flexibility so that as people start to move around and as the work continues to evolve, you can still be responsive, and it's not going to create a lot of space that has to be reconfigured every time.
Sure.
And well, I can add on, I'm sorry, Doug, I can add on to what Janet said we would also then use what she just talked about, is how people are going to use those spaces. Then the people themselves draw up the workplace etiquette guidelines that say, we understand that there are focus work that needs to get done here. So if a conversation lasts more than 1 minute, we are going to get up and move away to a collaborative area that's further down or something like that. So we get people to envision what the new behaviors are going to be and then come up with the guidelines as to how their behavior would need to change in the new space.
Great point, Cheryl, like the use of speakerphones, where they're used and where they're not.
Yep.
And that we've got a couple of policy questions here in just a minute, but I'm going to pull one up from a little bit further down the list because I think it fits really well here. In very typical projects for us here at AgilQuest, one of the very first steps we do is we measure the utilization of the current space. We gather the data that allows somebody to make decisions about how much of their workforce is mobile, who really qualifies for a telework or hoteling program, and who are the people that are in the office so often that they really need to keep their permanently assigned seat. That is a critical element early on in all the successful programs like that. But we're measuring really the occupancy, is somebody physically using this in this particular seat or in this particular meeting room? How do you measure how do you measure utilization of the space? That was one of the questions here. But follow on to that is, how do you tell how people are using it? If we know that 5 people are sitting in those 5 seats, how do we tell? What are the methods you use to tell? Are those people doing things that are focus kind of activities, or are those things that are more collaborative, open kind of activities?
That's a really great question, because a lot of people will say, hey, I'm going to use seat occupancy sensors. That only tells you if somebody's in the seat. It doesn't tell you what they're doing. And so we come at it from 2 different ways. One is a workplace performance index, a WPI survey that we use with all employees that tell us how they perceive how they perceive they're working, and where are they doing certain work, and how effective is the space to support it. So that's one piece. But again, that's a self-perception. But then we couple it with an activity analysis that we're walking around observing as designers. And you may select a couple of key routes that you really pull some quantitative and quantitative data around that of exactly, is somebody in that room, but are there, and what are they doing? Did somebody just leave because there's signs of life and they may have just stepped away, but you can tell it's really in use? Or is that space hasn't even been tapped in use all day long? And you're able to start to look at how people are actually using the space in terms of reality and perception, and then where are the gaps, and then follow up with some focus groups to actually understand the how and the why behind the data that you actually gathered. Because it's one thing, that's all in what's happening currently, but may not start to capture how they're going to be working in the future and new desired behaviors as well. So starting to understand all three key pieces of information start to give you a fuller picture. And then ongoing monitoring.
Okay, excellent. And as I said, it kind of fits into the policy question as well, how are you using it now versus how do you plan on using it in the future. And Cheryl, you shared a couple of examples. I think you called them etiquette documents, but they're
right.
Fundamentally policy. Well, this is how the organization wants you to behave, or how we as a community have decided that we will work best together. Can you answer two questions? The first being, what did you mean by the people, the actual end users make those policies up?
Right.
That's kind of one question. And the second one, what we've asked was how do you effectively enforce a clean desk policy? But I think that question could be broadened to, once you do have those policies in place, what mechanisms, what do you do so that you are enforcing, so people who are let's say misbehaving or misusing something,
right,
get kind of corrective action?
Peer pressure works really well. So we have the peers, the people themselves draw up the etiquette guidelines. We usually have some examples to share with them, but they typically make it their own. So we might give them some guidelines that we've used in the past. But then in terms of enforcing it, we ask them, we say, okay, so how are we going to enforce this? And in a recent example, after occupancy, we a subset of that larger group, so about three of us walked through, three of the people with me, walked through and looked to see if people were enforcing, like the personalization of workstations, for example, would be one, and that would be, or clean desk policy, if that's another one, and said, okay, so now what? Now that we know that these couple people here aren't doing this, what happens next? And so we try to see what fits the culture of that organization. And so what these people decide to do is, well, one-on-one, one of us will go talk to that person. Maybe they weren't aware. And it turns out that that's exactly what happens. So we had this policy of not having stuff on top of the flipper door units or whatever, and it was a safety issue as well. Things can fall down on somebody on the other side of the panel. And so one-on-one went, talked to that person. The person was, oh, I'm so sorry, didn't know about that, didn't know about the workplace guidelines. She then read them. She then redid everything and allowed us to take a photo of her workstation before and after, and then we put that in the electronic newsletter, and she was happy to comply. She said, I didn't even know. I was unaware. And so it was a wonderful example of how to use people themselves to police each other and talk to people one-on-one instead of someone having to be heavy-handed about it.
That's an awesome example. I've actually, I know I've heard Mark Smith from Noblis share this a couple of times. He's a big fan of the hotel, the traditional hotel idea, in that when you go reserve a room at a Marriott somewhere, you bring all your stuff with you. And when you go to check out of the hotel, you pack it all back up and you take it all home with you. And that same kind of idea applies when you're collaboratively reusing resources, these expensive assets within the office. So I'm gonna put a picture of Mark up with that quote of like this. You wouldn't leave all your stuff at a hotel, so don't leave it all over your desk.
That's right.
And another customer, KPMG, has a terrific kind of mature program where they've done some advanced stuff, and they're reverse hoteling. So the people who are in the office pretty much every single day still reserve their desks. They reserve them over the long term only on the days that they know they're not going to be in the office. When they're going to be traveling or doing some training or when they're out sick, they will flag their desk within the system that it's available for somebody else to reuse. And that means that area has to be prepared. It has to be usable and serviceable by whoever comes in and uses it like a kind of a typical hoteling or telework desk. So they had to come up with a policy that worked well for the people who were permanently assigned those seats, but still needed to clean up some portion of those desks to make them usable by others. And they came up with kind of a relaxed clean desk policy that still that fit both sides of that equation. I thought that was a really interesting, advanced way of dealing with getting to even higher and higher utilization. The next question I have here, were there any noise cancellation systems used for any of these projects?
I think there were a number of the examples that Gensler showed had white noise. There's a number of different things that you can do to mitigate noise. One is starting to zone kind of noisy things together and create quiet areas for focus. And how you're locating even enclosed functions like conference and meeting spaces and the like to break up a floor plate will really help quite a lot with mitigating noise as well. But a number of them had sound masking systems, which can work very well for helping with speech privacy. It doesn't cancel all the noise, but it does help with speech privacy.
And I
can't speak to Noblis. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I concur with what Janet said. All the projects that I've been involved in with change management have included white noise, sound masking.
Interesting. I think it would be, we're going to have to schedule some kind of tour of the Noblis space sometime in the near future. It's just such a rich environment for ideas and experience. We're a little bit over time here. We've got one more question. I think this will probably be a pretty quick answer, but we'll send the rest of these questions to the team and ask them to answer over email. And we have one question right up at the front that about high-tech workplace that really Mark's probably going to have to address. But anyway, so Cheryl, is there a way that CM could be compared with ISO?
Oh, I don't know. I don't probably know enough about ISO myself to be able to answer that. I do know that the change management, I believe there's a lot of measurements with ISO from what I understand, and with change management, some of the measurements are a little softer. And so we do surveys before and after, so we'll do a pre-occupancy survey and a post-occupant survey if we can get the customer to agree to it. Some customers, I had one that would do a pre so that we knew what people's hot buttons were, and that's a great way to understand that from a change management point of view, but then would not allow us to do a post because they didn't have money to make any of the changes or anything that might have to happen after that. So from what I know about ISO, I think there is some measurement that I don't know if it's going to be objective enough rather than subjective in the change management process.
Sure.
And I can add that Gensler uses our WPI survey as both a pre and a post to measure the workplace effectiveness, and we've also used it to identify those change management issues that need to be addressed.
Terrific. Okay. Well, I'm sorry we ran out of time for today's topic. I knew it was going to be really interesting. We have lots of people on board. Why Ashley and I created the kind of longer format here. Janet and Cheryl, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing with us today. We've got your contact information. It's kind of elaborate, so we're going to send it over email to all the folks who are registered here so they can reach out and ask you more questions or ask for advice or engage in some kind of way. Thank you, audience participants out there. Those are some excellent questions. The recording will be up on the webinar probably next week. And I just want to make sure that everybody watches their inbox. The July webinar's topic is communicating the personal ROI and what's in it for me back out to those same employees and workers who need to understand what's going on, making sure that your program for communicating what they're going to get out of this, the gain side of it, is strong and meets up with the change management. And again, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody else, have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.